Hi, Sandy. Happy episode 26. Woohoo, Judgy Judy.
Woohoo!
How are you
Judgy
today?
Judy, I am good. I have to tell you, I'm going to do a little flashback to episode 23. Notice I'm dressed up, but I'm wearing a dress with boots and heels. A new habit, 23 was on habits, is every day, even if I don't go out, my goal is to go through every piece of clothing in my closet this year. COVID, no COVID, if I need to change when I walk the dog, I will change, but darn it, I'm going to wear the clothes in my closet. So Garrett said I even smell good. I put on perfume. So
Wow,
how about
that's
that? So I just
awesome.
wanted to share, anybody we'd love to hear anything you've done to change or modify your habits and your 1%. So feedback would be great. And we're going from habits to Judgy Judy.
That's awesome. Hey, quick tip on that.
Yeah,
Turn all your hangers backwards. And then when you wear it, put it the correct way, and then you'll know what you've worn.
I love it. Oh my gosh, thank you.
There
Great
you go. So
tip.
you won't
Thank
even have
you.
to think about it now. Your year is set. Okay,
Ready.
Judgy Judy, here we go. We were talking about this because we are trying to decide what the difference is between a judgment and an opinion. And the word this Judgy Judy, I've never heard this before. Well, I've heard of Judge Judy, but tell me about Judgy Judy.
So my millennial niece, who's in her 20s, brought up this phrase, and she used it to her father, who's my brother, who I love dearly. And she would use it with me on occasion. But if we would say something, if you've ever been corrected by a millennial and they don't like judgy, they don't like stereotypy, and she would use this little catchphrase, Judgy Judy, you're being Judgy Judy, you're being Judgy Judy. And we would even start using it on each other, my brother and I, if we got caught in being judgy. And regardless of how big the infraction, the phrase is stuck. So it's funny that now Garrett will be like, you're being Judgy Judy. And it's just a phrase that started with a millennial. And sometimes the best reminders are the catchiest ones, right? So
Right.
Judgy Judy it is.
And I love that it's a casual calling each other out on it
Right.
without being mean and and you take it, you're like, okay, I get it.
It is back to, even researching and thinking about this is how easy it is to jump to judgment and how quick the phrase is a quick catch reminder that you kind of get a smile on your face. Oh, I am being Judgy Judy, rather than Sandy, we really need to think about not judging anymore. So I'm all for catchy phrases to keep me in my place.
I think it's awesome. And that everybody feels comfortable calling each other out.
And that it came from a 20-something-year-old. I'm glad she even knows who Judge Judy is.
Right. I don't know. Is that a good or bad?
Or she's just applying it to us because we're close to the same age. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So opinion versus judgment. I did so much research on this over the week when I knew this was our topic, and I have not come up with a solid answer to that.
Okay.
So, because I was listening to a podcast, and this person was talking about how people were judging her about something. And I was thinking, are they just saying an opinion, or is there actually a judgment there? And they maybe say they're saying an opinion, but does the receiver see it as a judgment?
And is an opinion okay if it's not asked for? I guess would be my question, because whether you call it an opinion or a judgment, is it appropriate to pass judgment or opinion unwarranted on someone when the feedback isn't asked for?
Right. Right.
Because
So
judgment. Okay, so when you did your research, what were the definitions? Were there stark differences in the definitions if we go back to the core?
no, an opinion can be a judgment.
Okay.
Judgments, okay. Opinions don't have to be based in fact. That was kind of the premise of most everything I read. Judgments are usually based in fact, but I don't think that's necessarily true when it comes to us judging other people.
Okay.
because we could be making assumptions that form an opinion that make us judge people. So I I kind of got to nowhere in my research. I'm just gonna say that.
Don't you think judgment, okay, so judgment is typically back to judging, it's usually directed to a person. Okay. And an opinion is many times not directed toward a person. It might be a belief or uh, how you construe an event happening. Usually we don't use judgment with that, but usually opinion toward a person in the context of language is we ask for an opinion, or we'll say, I didn't ask for your opinion. I guess we don't always ask for your opinion, but is your opinion on people or is your opinion more on the situation?
I think it could be both. So that's a good question. Maybe that's the deciphering thing. Like if you have an opinion on a person,
Mhm.
it's a judgment versus an opinion on a situation. Maybe. I, again, I've gone around and around on this topic and I haven't come up with a conclusive answer. One of the things that I really feel like a lot of people give opinions, or even if they're asked for an opinions, but the receiver may feel like it's a judgment. And I
Person who you think she has an opinion on everything,
right.
which might be a
Or
natural
well,
curiosity or a
also
natural
here's an
conversation.
example. This is an example my husband and I were talking about. Say I go to the mall and I see a kid wearing an outfit that I'm like, eh, I would never let my kids wear that outfit. Or, like I have some control over that. but it's judging them. It's an opinion, but it's also a judgment of them that they would go out and wear that outfit.
I have an interesting, well, at least I think it's interesting observation on that is, do you notice people pass a lot of judgment on social media, or when there's a crowd of people or a group of people, it's so easy to pass judgment on something from the outside to gain acceptance or conversation from the others. But isn't it an interesting fact that so often, like the words you use, passing judgment, we like to back it up with something we wouldn't do? Because how often I read, I don't agree with this president because that's not how I raise my kids. I don't, they'll throw in the kid factor to it when in reality it's their opinion, but they feel like it validates the opinion turned to judgment by saying, my kids wouldn't do that. That wouldn't happen in my home. That's not how I'm using the kid because I hear that a lot. And I've
Yeah,
heard that a lot with politics or trashing somebody on the other side. Well, that's not how I raise my kids. And that validation, almost back to us going through our definitions, isn't the validation of that's not okay because I wouldn't do it. And here's why, a validation that you are judging rather than having an opinion because you don't feel confident in your own comment.
right. And I would say some of the stuff that I read, which ties to this, is a lot of judgment is tied to self-esteem. And when you're judging other people, what you're doing is trying to make yourself feel better about yourself and saying, I wouldn't do that. I'm better than that.
Right.
My kids wouldn't do that. My kids are better than that. My colleagues wouldn't do that. They're better than that.
It
So
is
it's kind
totally
of
self-validation. And who likes to be judged? I hate being judged, but I'm very quick to either ignore or knock down. I mean, I have no problem saying, don't judge me. With my brother, it's Judgy Judy, but he's not one that usually judges me. But if I feel I'm being judged, I'm kind of like a pent-up cat. I don't, it's not up to you to judge me. So it's interesting as when we went to this topic, part of it with me was internal because I felt like nobody likes to be judged, but everyone's so quick to do it. And
mhm,
it's such a opposite. It's kind of like I hate stubbing my toe. It hurts so bad, but I'm going to step on everybody else's toe. It makes no common sense why we do it when we all hate it so much, but we do it to other people.
okay. So let's flip this upside down because I was just thinking What do we think of people who never have an opinion?
Weak. What do you think? What's
Yeah,
your word?
like that they're just that they're weak, that they don't know how to speak up for themselves, that they don't have confidence in their ideas and their thoughts. Uh, but really, what we're saying is if you don't have, if you have an opinion, you don't share it unless somebody asks.
Right.
And so, how do we balance that of keeping our opinions to ourselves and not feeling like we're being weak and not confident in expressing ourselves with being judgy?
I think part of it is if an opinion is on a person, back to judgment, because feeling judged or somebody having an opinion on you or your situation, I think the person offering the opinion needs to step back and say, is this judgment? Is this opinion? And will it help? Is this out of a place of love and friendship that I want to share this? And
Right.
in what state is my friend that they're willing to take that advice, right? It's a bit what's advice, what's feedback, right? Um, and knowing that maybe the timing isn't right, or just what is your motive in doing that? And do you need to share that opinion? Is
Right.
that opinion worthwhile?
Right. Because if your motive is to make someone look bad, then that's a judgment and that's not good. Like that, or that it's if it's to make other people look bad, you
But I
shouldn't
don't
be
think
sharing it.
judging people, truly judging, the term judging is never of pure motive, because it's never, oh, thank you so much for judging me and telling me about that. Part of judging in my mind is it's a third party. Okay, let's think about Judge Judy. Judge Judy doesn't know the people. She's taking in the facts, but she does not have any background. She is coming to a judgment based off of what's placed in front of her. And many times that's why being judge and jury, is these people have no concept of my background. They're hearing or seeing or taking in what they perceive as the two sides and coming up with an opinion that almost always doesn't feel fair, right? And we
Right.
all feel like we have to be the judge and jury. And do you think part of this too is because we're posting everything on social media and we're sharing every part of our lives? So we're kind of giving, we're feeding the judges and the judge and jury on our lives, and they're coming to conclusions because we're also throwing it out there.
Right. That could be. So your visualization of Judge Judy and the two parties, and she gets to hear both sides and then she makes a judgment. That could be the key right there because a lot of times we're making judgments on one
One
side.
side.
And so if you're going to make a judgment, you need to make sure you're hearing both sides.
And I'll tell you a great example is when I was going through my divorce, which is now like 11 years ago. Wow.
Oh,
And there, easy example, whether it's a divorce or a breakup, because there are two sides. And people almost always only hear one side because they're talking to one party. And people almost always run to a judgment in which side to be on. Politics would be another one, right? When there's clearly you're hearing one side of the story. But it seems like because maybe judgment sometimes has a place of good intent because they feel like they're protecting the side they're listening to, and they don't take the time to listen to the other side. So what kind of judgment is ever going to be good if the judge only hears one side and becomes emotionally involved with that side? But
right.
nothing good comes out of bad judgment, right? And bad judgment is not hearing both sides.
Right.
So many people had, and I tell you too, I'll go back to the divorce story. I felt judged all the time. I felt judged. Part of it might have been where I was at, but it was happening because I was front and center. And how did this happen? We really liked both of them. Somebody had to have done something wrong. And then you get caught up in, when you're being judged, you feel like you have to work even harder to convince the judge that you're not guilty. So it's kind of like the trial that never ends, and more evidence, more evidence, more evidence. So I'll get back to the Judgy Judy, which I think is a great visual, is if you are the one being judged, it can be the road to nowhere to try to defend yourself, because you could be throwing, let's use our percentages again, you could be throwing 10% of the information out there and working really hard to get it out there and to clear yourself, when the other side, they might be somebody they talk to every day or have a long-term relationship with that has 90% of the impact, and you're never going to win, and you're spending a lot of valuable time trying to defend yourself and
Right.
trying to get that judgment to go in your favor. So fighting judgment, I guess that's a good question. If you are being judged and you feel unfairly, do you fight it and get your side of the story out there? Do you set things right? Or do you back away because it's not worth your time? I mean, how should one respond to a Judgy Judy?
I think everybody would be different in that response. How much energy is it worth?
Mhm.
And uh, because I think it's fair to call people out if they're judging you, but I also, if there's so much energy that you're putting towards it, I would move on to something different, but I think everybody would be different on how they deal with it.
And I tell you, I think that's a great advice. And I think it's great for everybody to think about. Be intentional about knowing when you're being judged, what your reaction is to it, and how you're going to react. An example I'd give is, oh, I get a lot of people on social media that, people just fly with comments because it's easy, or they wouldn't say them, but they'd write them, don't you ever work? My response I want to say is, well, I'm not going to take pictures while I work. And, it's easy to almost get defensive, or why, I don't even care if I don't care. You just have to learn to let some
Right.
judgments just fall off of you. um, if a judgment is, Garrett feels I'm being too hard on my youngest son, and I don't think he's fairly analyzing it, I think the response is, and those are kind of, I'm using extremes there, but using that as an example, he's judging me. I'm feeling unfairly judged because all he heard was the last conversation I had with my son, and he
Right.
doesn't know the context of the week that I've went through with him. Um, so first of all, when you're being judged, the normal reaction is to get extremely emotional or pissed off, right? Nobody likes to be judged. Is, if it's worth your time to set the facts straight, no different than when you're in court, being mad in court, really visualizing Judgy Judy is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
If you really want to not just win your case, but have it be a fair trial with the facts, you have to be calm about it. So me saying, hey, Garrett, let me tell you what happened the last week. This is behind the scenes. And then
Right.
tell me what you think about it. And don't say you're judging me. Just get the facts out there, but picture yourself. Judgy Judy isn't a bad thing. Picture yourself there and how you're going to poise yourself to get to a fair
I
resolution.
know.
Because
I
you'll
love
probably
that.
learn something too.
Again, that's another great resolution. And I would say check yourself if you're forming opinions. Like, why do I feel the need to form this opinion? So I'm going to go back to your divorce, because actually the podcast I was listening to it was about someone getting divorced, and she had
Okay.
started dating, and people were judging her because it was so soon, she's dating so soon, so why do we feel like we need to make that opinion or have an opinion? Like, if you start to have opinions about people, start checking yourself as, why do I feel the need to have an opinion about this?
That's a
Why do I
great
need
comment.
to be involved in this? What is in my being that I feel like I have to have an opinion? Can I just say, good for her. Let's move on. Like, we don't have to have an opinion.
Right.
But I think that goes back to, we don't want to feel weak. We don't want to feel like we don't have convictions, so I think that's a hard balance.
And how often Can you think of examples where you've formed an opinion? You might never have spoken it, but formed an opinion in your head and later found out you were completely wrong, and almost the embarrassment of, I almost went down a road because
Yes.
I did not take the time to ask the questions, get the facts. It's very easy to form opinions in your head that lead to judgments, and many times false judgments, because you do not have all the information.
Have you ever read the book Sway?
No.
It's about, well, so this was many years ago that I read it, probably 10 or 15 years ago. I don't know.
Okay.
But I remember the premise was swaying people's opinions of other things. So
Okay.
somebody like I could say to you, Sandy, um, those that fruit, that pomegranate is horrible. It tastes lousy. So I'm swaying your opinion. You've never tried a pomegranate. And you're like, nah, yeah, I don't think I'm going to try it. I've heard it's bad. So I've swayed your opinion on that. Okay. Without you ever even moving past that. So you can do that about people. And I noticed this one time, somebody told
Okay.
me something about somebody. And I walked up to a group one time and this person was talking, and I caught myself thinking what somebody had told me about this person that I had never even met. And I was like, okay, I need to have an open mind because I'm being swayed by this other person, what this other person said. They shared their opinion and they completely swayed me. But where it really, so where the book really hit home for me was teachers talking about students,
Mm-hmm.
the next year's teachers, and how it was
Yes.
driving how the teachers responded to the kids coming in because the kids' story stayed with them forever instead of letting them have a fresh start. So it's
I
a
love
good book.
that.
It was really thoughtful, but opinions can hurt. Opinions, judgments, they can shut people down from experiencing something different than what you're sharing.
I think at the end of the day, the only person we can truly change is ourselves. We're in charge of our actions and our words. And
Yes.
we know that opinions can hurt. We know that judgment is something we don't like. Okay. And even if it's judgment that's true, usually back to the word being judged means somebody is judging that is not in the right seat to do that.
Okay, so Sandy, let's finish that thought.
Okay, I'm gonna throw in one thing with this, and it's a thought that came yesterday. How does bias work its way into here? Because we all have these natural biases, and back to being yourself and thinking, I would throw in the word bias because the example I give is last night we had book club, and I had somebody join our book club, and I thought about this last night quite a bit, and I had brought up, she was new to the group. It was a virtual book club that's open to everyone. And I had brought up the point in the book that there were two characters were bisexual, and what did everybody think about that? And the answer was, wow, didn't even think about it, well, blah blah blah. Later she had pointed out that she was married to a woman, which was great, but it bothered me that I thought, why did I bring that up? And again, I don't think I have any biases against sexuality. I think I'm a great person about that, but it made me think about how we can bring up topics, suggestions overall, that there might be some bias in those. And I was putting myself in her shoes on how often she probably goes into conversations where people will bring up their judgment and bias against her sexuality.
Right.
And I guess that's the point I'd make too, is we're in control of ourselves and our own thoughts and actions. But when we think about what we're saying and what we're thinking, is walk in the other person's shoes, try to understand, is there any biases that are helping your thoughts come to those types of conclusions? And I think it's back to, we talk about intentionality a lot. The real in this is to keep ourselves in check and to really think through what's coming out of our mouths, what's in our thoughts, and what's driving some of these opinions, and are they fair, and walking in other people's shoes.
right. And I'm thinking her feeling when you asked that question, she was probably very nervous as to what people were going to say.
Right.
And thankfully everybody was on board and didn't even pay it, didn't, it was like a non-event. So
Right.
thankfully for that, but I'm sure like understanding that she was probably like, oh crap, what are people gonna say
Right.
is and
It did make me think of
I,
myself, Amy, that was I biased in bringing it up? And then I actually was beating myself up for this, thinking, did I bring this? Was I wrong in bringing this up? And I thought, gosh, we talked about the guy being, that's part of talking about characters in a book. But I would tell you, it was good for me to have that self-awareness of saying, was I being biased and just bringing that up as a piece of the book? Do I have a hidden bias in my mind that
right.
it meant something? So it was good self-awareness.
Well, and I think sometimes there's an assumption that everyone in the room is like us. And like I've been doing a lot of classes on bias. So
Right.
I'm like, and we do not intend to do so many things, but sometimes we've been just around so many people who are just like us that we would do like I think it's a fair question, and I think it's fair that she called you out on it
Right.
because it made her uncomfortable. So raising awareness is awesome.
Right.
And you
Your
took
point,
it well.
bias, not
I,
not like us. I had to bring up something that a typical book wouldn't be like that. That's why I brought it up. I mean, usually one character, but two, when that wasn't the theme of the book. If that was the theme of the book, but it wasn't, it was this undertone,
yeah,
but not like us.
yeah, interesting. Okay, so we do have a couple of questions here
Okay.
to our topic. Um, okay, here's one. Is it a judgment if you keep it to yourself? Or is
Yeah.
it an opinion if you keep it to yourself?
I think it's a judgment. I mean, it could be either, depending on what the thought is.
Yeah,
Whether you think it or say it, it's still a judgment. There's that. I mean, let's get what's a big race is a big issue right now. Oh, there's that thug. You might
yeah,
not say it, but if I'm thinking there's that thug out there doing Black Lives Matter
yeah,
versus there's that nice private school boy that's just trying to say what's on his mind. Good for him. He'll be a good lawyer someday. That's
right,
not okay.
right, right. I completely agree. I think if it's internal, it's still an opportunity to check yourself because there's something that's driving your need to have an opinion, have a judgment, could be biases, just could be self-esteem issues, could be whatever it is. But it usually comes out, is what I always think.
Mhm.
It may not come out in words, but it might come out like you just made a face when you're like, you know, you can read it in body language. I don't know.
I mean,
So
saying it is always, actions are always worse because now you've acted on the thought. So I think there's a different level of severity on what the impact is, and if you've shared it with others to push your bias, so obviously it's not right to have it in your mind, but at least you haven't acted on it.
right.
Maybe.
So the next question was tips for dealing with people who talk about people.
Oh, drives me crazy.
I know, but how do you deal with it? So I found this statistic in this, and it said 60%, this is a Yale researcher found that 60% of adult conversations talk about people who are not with us at the time.
60? Oh my
60%.
goodness.
I know. That's what I thought. I was like, okay, so that's a really good check because if we're talking about people who aren't with us, then that means we're probably, well, it could be good news. It could be good stuff. Um, but how do we shut that down?
Well, I shut it down because I tend not to be by people who do that. And I'm being a
So one
little,
of the tips was
I, I
avoid the people.
I really do. If it's somebody that I think it isn't normal for them, or we get caught up in the moment, it's sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, we have to stop. This isn't, we wouldn't like it if there's a different comfort level, but we all know those people that's just part of their being and it's an insecurity. And I have people that I really, really like, but I really don't like to be by because That's what they do. And we know the minute we leave the room, they're doing the same thing with us. And honestly, I don't want to give them more ammunition for myself, back to being judged. I tell you, the other thing is, if it's somebody where I think it's not um, part of their being, because if it's some people, it's just part of their being, and they don't, it's Eleanor Roosevelt, they have nothing else to talk about. The great example I give is Garrett. He never talks about people behind their back, ever, 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 ever. And he will, even in little, maybe I'm a 10% of the time person, he will call me out on it and say, and that's a very good mentor, because it's helped me learn it's okay to call people out on it. If it's people I care about and I know we've just gone down a fair hole we shouldn't go down, it's okay to catch ourselves or say, let's just stop. This is not, if we want to talk to her about this or him about this, let's just go talk to them about it. Or how are we going to proactively, if there's something we need to, us talking about is going to do no good. And there was one time when I was with my brother and we went down this ferret hole acting like we were kids again, because sometimes this improves with maturity, right? And we went down a ferret hole and we were talking about people, and I don't know, it's probably people we went to high school with, and we left and Garrett's like, what just happened? I just feel like I have to take a shower. And he was right. We just went, and I think about that a lot. If I start going down that ferret hole, is you're making other people think that, that's, it's just not attractive.
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
about you?
that's fine. So one of the tips in here was, I love that you said, don't be around those people. Call them out on it. That was one of the things, like, what's going on here? Why are we talking about this? Change the topic. Another thing is, talk about your openness to people from diverse backgrounds. So when somebody starts talking about it, then you can say, you know what, everybody comes from a different background. Everybody has different cultures. Everybody has, and I thought that was a really nice
That's
tip.
very good.
Shift the conversation.
Very good.
So that it shows that you're accepting and that you're not going to participate in that conversation. So anyway, that was my research for the week.
Very good. I love it.
Thank you. I enjoy, I'm just going to say, I love these topics because it does make me dig in and do a little research and try to solidify my ideas around this stuff, my opinions around this stuff.
Right. And then living it, right?
And then trying to live it. Oh my gosh, that's the hard part, trying to live it. Yeah. Okay. So what's the real and what's the ideal in these situations? I think the real is that there's always going to be people who have opinions. There's always going to be people who have judgments. And I think it's also, the real is that we're going to have opinions and we're going to judge people. But I would flip that and say the ideal is to try to minimize it. Try to catch yourself. Try to have the conversation in your head of, why am I judging this person?
I think I'll say I agree with you on the real. I think that's great. Good advice. I think the ideal gets back to my niece Kai, is keeping each other in check. And I love your minimizing it and being responsible for our own actions and calling out the people in our close circle and constantly knowing it's always out there. Constantly, you know what? When you're trying to lose weight, the chocolate bars and the potato chips are always out there too. You have to decide if you're going to eat them or not. So same with judgment. There you go.
Very good. I love that. It's always so tempting.
Oh.
Very good. Very good. Okay. Let's do our wrap question really quick.
Okay.
Do you have a pet update? Anything exciting going on with your animals? I've got a good story.
Okay. I can't wait to hear your story. Mine, Garrett and I just gaze at him. We're these empty nesters. If there could be a spoiled dog, or if they weren't so darn wonderful companions and kind-hearted and beautiful, we just stare at him and say, we love you, you're beautiful, everything he does is cute. We are like a couple of old people with a dog. So there's no one story. Where is he? Oh, he's laying on the floor behind me, just waiting for his.
He was right there. Yeah.
Yeah, he's so no one story other than, oh my gosh, I'm very grateful for my dog.
Good. I love it.
I can't wait. I want to hear a good story here.
So I am 99% on your page of, I love my dogs. I just do. They're adorable. They're sweet. They love me unconditionally. But this week, one of our dogs caught a squirrel. which
Good. Wow. That had to have been a big, your dog must dream that nightly and caught the squirrel. Okay.
use it. She chases them. She's always on it. And this week, um, I was texting with a friend who's a big Bears fan about the football game, and then she was texting stuff, and I looked outside, and our dog had a squirrel in her mouth
No.
at our door. Right.
No.
Yeah. So but then I'm like, oh my gosh, we could not get her to drop it. We spent 20 minutes dropping it. And then my friend was texting about the Bears game, and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's got 2 golden retrievers. So I was like, I have got a dog with a squirrel in her mouth. I'm missing the game. And then she started texting me ideas. Thankfully, she gave me the great idea to do a ball with peanut butter. And so that the dog would drop the squirrel and take the ball. Like
She just would not drop the squirrel.
she would not drop the squirrel for anything. I think she was so happy of all of this.
It was
weird
the squirrel
work.
dead. Did she kill the squirrel?
Yes, she killed the squirrel. It was sad. It was all very sad. It was very traumatic for all of us, but I will say the ball with peanut butter was the trick.
Oh my
And
gosh. That sounds like
thankfully-
straight out of Christmas, Chevy Chase's Christmas Vacation.
That's exactly what I thought of. But anyway, we had a squirrel event. It was very traumatic for me. That was the 1% of the time that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't stand this dog.
What did you do?
I was like, she killed the squirrel.
Oh,
But anyway, that was my
love
funny
that story. Sorry
right.
it was you, but I love that story.
I know. All right, great conversation again this week. And thanks everybody for joining us on the podcast. We'll talk to you next time.
All right, bye.
Bye.